can we go almost preemptively to combat the sense of overstimulation?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then for introverted, highly sensitive people, can it be our retreat, our
Yeah.
quiet, our time to just be?
Welcome to Sensitive Stories. This episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for treatment with a mental health or medical professional. Let's dive in. So, Jenna, can you start off by telling me your HSP discovery story? How, when you realized that you're highly sensitive?
Mhm. I love the way you say when you realize, because that feels different to me than like how long have you known? Did you always know? Because I have a sense for many HSPs, we've known that we feel the world deeply since we existed in this world, right? We've known there's been something different. We didn't realize what that meant or that there's a shared experience around it. Um, so yeah, I would say, how long have I known? Well, since I could understand that my experience seemed different. When did I realize this was actually a thing? This was a thing I share with other humans. It has a name, it has a way of understanding. Um, was in my MSW placement. I was in consultation with one of my amazing mentors and was talking about kind of this experience of noticing resonance with so many of my clients having like really similar challenges. And she named, it sounds like you work with a lot of highly sensitive people.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of that language is familiar to us just generally in culture, I think. So I said, yeah, sure, highly sensitive people. And she said, no, no, like, let me tell you more. And she started sharing more about HSPs as a trait, sharing more about kind of shared experience around being an HSP. Um, and it hit me, oh, so not only is this who I work with, this is who I am. And it was that moment that I said, so both I'm a highly sensitive person and I'm also a therapist for highly sensitive people. That's what I do. That makes sense. And then the same week, had another person in my life talking about their experience of late diagnosed ADHD and like coming to understand neurodiversity. And they named for me in passing, as I mentioned, my HSP kind of discovery moment. They said, did you know that high sensitivity is another form of neurodiversity? And then it kind of all clicked together. Okay, this isn't just this like set of traits that we kind of see, it's also brain difference. It's a different way of experiencing entirely because of how we're made up. And those two pieces together in the same week kind of set off this journey for me of research. Okay, what do we know? How do I understand this? How do I bring this into practice? From all my like really objective kind of research focused parts, and then all my more attuned kind of philosophical feeling parts, also having this moment of reflection and awakening of,
Mm.
okay, and now that I know this, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with the people that I work with. And so how can I actually move my practice into a place of making space for highly sensitive folks to know that like there is nothing wrong. This is simply how we are, and how can we make space to build a life that honors that instead of tries to work around this world
Yeah.
that just isn't always built for sensitive souls.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
love how you said, "This is who I am."
Hmm.
That's it. And I appreciate that distinction between just the language of being more sensitive in general, and then there's actual traits. Brain is different. It's wired differently, wired to process and reflect and feel. And then how you dove in kind of intellectually, but also in your feelings. I'm wondering why that was important to understand yourself at those different levels or with those different
Mhm.
parts.
Yeah, well, I see the world or see myself from a lens of us all having different parts of ourselves that
Mm,
kind of serve different roles or kind of bring different things to us at different moments. So I think my research parts needed evidence. They
mm,
needed to know,
mhm,
okay, is this actually a thing? Like, what do we objectively know? Um, and what can I objectively share with people,
mm,
right? They want to know the facts. They want to know how I can support people to say, hey, look how much this is a thing. We know all of this research about what can be helpful or just to validate that
mm,
this does exist. Um, and then my feeling parts, my kind of more compassionate parts also just needed to process. Okay, and like how do we settle into that
mm,
as an identity piece? How do we settle into that um as almost hearing that validation, as hearing that sense of we don't need to change, we merely need to understand and adjust
mm.
our way of being to honor our sensitivity so it doesn't feel so heavy all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is important to have the evidence, as you said, to know this is real. Because so many people will say, "Oh, it's
Mhm.
made up. It's
Yeah.
trauma, or it's a mental health issue." All right, we are literally wired differently. Our brains are different for a reason. There's lots of advantages, and to know that
Mhm.
that's true, and then to be able to share it with others is so important, and have that solid information, and then also to accept it for ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love how you
Because
said I settle in. Yeah.
yeah, settle in because it's different to kind of we need to hear it objectively, but then it's different to hear it and believe it,
Mm, mm-hmm.
right? Um, and so especially it makes sense in a world where we get so many of those messages, like you said, about this isn't real, or this is just kind of like some kind of deficiency in some way, or this is a problem. Of course, it's going to take a minute to settle in, make sense that parts want the hard evidence to help
Yes.
that kind of process of getting there because for so long you hear something really different
Yeah.
growing up as a highly sensitive person, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we hear a lot of messages about our sensitive experience, and it does take a while to kind of weed through all of that and come back to self. Um, in your settling in process, I'm wondering how nature has played a part in that, because I know that's a big resource for you and one that you use in your practice. Could you say a bit more about how that has been supportive?
Mhm. Nature is a huge ally for me in any kind of moment of change or a moment of reflection or discovery because it is one of these few places in the world that there's a general acceptance of we can go there and be quiet and
Mm,
be by ourselves and
yeah.
just have time to let things settle, to let kind of calm come forward and to process all the ways that we're processing information and change and news as a highly sensitive person. We know we just need time to do that reflective work. It's one of our greatest strengths. And if we don't get it, sure can feel heavy and overwhelming because we just have so much information coming in that to have that time allows us to do something with that information,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
So nature was a bit of an escape for me in early HSP discovery season and early therapy work
Mm,
too, for me to be able to have that space, to be able to be quiet, to be able to sort through everything that I was hearing and then notice what's happening inside for me. Where am I landing? What intuitively is coming forward? All of these things that we can notice if we just slow down. And we have permission in nature to slow down. It's so accepted to be like, yeah, we're going to sit quietly on our porch or we're going to go for a walk by ourselves. That building that in was really important for me and being able to start to even carve out space for myself to really honor sensitivity in a way too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It is a space, I love what you said, to get quiet, to settle, to find calm, something we need so much, but is not often accessible, and to process what, right, that peace that we need every single day. Can you say a little bit more about what processing might look like when you're outside in nature for folks who
Mm.
maybe haven't had that experience or haven't connected the dots before about that's what they're doing?
Yeah. Well, it like it's an interesting question. What does processing look like? Because it's gonna look really different for different people,
Mhm.
probably. Um, but I guess I'll talk about why might it be useful to go to nature when you're processing in whatever
Mm,
way
yeah,
you're
that's
doing
helpful.
that. Um, so we know from tons and tons of research that there's all of these benefits of being with nature. Some of them are calm or to increase feelings of happiness. Beautiful. You
Mm,
can imagine if you're processing, you might want to call on that to help regulate you as you're going through something. But we also see all these other interesting benefits that maybe get
mm,
talked about a little less. So creativity for
mm,
folks who spend time in nature report feeling more creative, including creative problem solving,
mm,
which if we're coming to understand something new about ourselves or our world or process our day, taking a problem to nature and seeing what kind of creative solutions come forward can be a way to get unstuck too. We also see things like an increase in focus or an increase in energy in time with nature, which again, like really fascinating stuff. So it's more than just calm that comes forward. It's also all of these innate resources
mm,
of creativity, confidence, calm, but also focus, problem solving, energy. All of these things kind of can emerge naturally when we give ourselves space.
mm,
So, what does that processing look like for me? It often will look like going with an intention to nature, something like, okay, I'm going to sit outside today, I'm going to go on this walk today, and I'm going to bring a problem to nature. I'm going to bring something with me. I'm gonna say, I want to understand, like, how do I start talking about high sensitivity with people in my life? For example, that was a really early kind of
mm,
processing thing for me. Um, and just seeing what comes forward when I give myself that space and when I partner with this natural energy that kind of comes forward for us when we're in nature. Yeah.
mhm. I love that idea of taking a problem to nature because it
Mhm.
can get really overwhelming sitting with those big questions. How do I tell someone I'm highly sensitive, or how do I make a decision about a major life moments, changing jobs, or
Yeah.
moving, or having a child, any of those things? Taking it to nature and getting quiet, tapping into intuition, tapping to the, I think you said, innate resources. Um, just to go back a little bit, when we're talking about nature, what does
Mhm.
that mean? Is that, do I need to get out into the woods, to the ocean, or could it look like something else? How would you define
Good.
nature?
Yeah, beautiful question. And it could be so many different things, right? How would you define nature? That's such a huge question.
I know it's a good.
Um, Probably says every highly sensitive person who thinks about
Yes.
things a million ways, but here we are. Okay, so how would I define nature? I would say nature for me is tapping into earth or elements in any way that feels attuned and accessible.
Mm,
So it could be, and oftentimes, this is what people think of. They think of like sitting on the beach or they think of the walk in a wooded area. And yes, that's beautiful, amazing nature connection. It also happens to not be accessible most of the time for a lot of folks, right?
yeah.
So, nature can also be snuggling with your cat,
Hmm.
sitting in a bubble bath, like going to a farmer's market in the middle of a major city and feeling connected to the food and like people who grew that food and that
Mm,
sense of this coming from somewhere. All of that can be nature, right?
Mm,
So yeah, when we say bring a problem to nature, could be something like I'm sitting by my window on a rainy day. I don't necessarily need to be immersed fully. There's lots of different ways to connect
mm,
physically. And because we have this beautiful strength as highly sensitive people of feeling into experience, it also can just be connecting emotionally or connecting
mm,
almost like philosophically to the essence of nature. We
mm.
can turn kind of that sense of deep connectedness to the world into our connection with nature too.
That's really beautiful. Like connecting with any of the natural elements that you have access to in your space,
Hmm.
water,
Hmm.
food, people,
Yeah.
just all kind. I mean, I could just think of so many um, options that are on the table now versus I
Mm.
need to trek to the woods or to the
Right.
forest because not everyone has that available.
No.
So know that there are other ways to do it. So,
If people feel
yeah.
stuck, I'll sometimes suggest start with your senses. So
Mm,
go
mhm,
through and say, like, what's available, accessible, or meaningful to me based on sight. Well, right now it might be I'm looking at houseplants. I'm looking at a photograph of a nature place that holds like nostalgic value to me. Could be sound. I could be putting on rain sounds in my home, or listening to fireplace channel. Even that
I love
does do
that.
something for our system, right? So going through our senses can be a way of almost getting out of the stuckness of nature is this one thing that I have to be like moving through, adventuring through, not just sitting with, experiencing. Um, yeah,
I love that. There's a lot of options there. I feel like the
so
menu
many
is
options.
long. And that's a great way to think about, okay, if I'm thinking about my senses, what could I access in my space? Could I
Mhm.
look at a photo? Could I listen to nature sounds? Thankfully, there's lots of things on YouTube now with
Yes.
nature
Yeah.
visuals. Could I get a houseplant? Could I cuddle with my
Mhm.
cat? So
Yeah.
many things.
So
So,
many things.
yeah, it's amazing when you think about it. So we could bring a problem to nature.
Mhm.
I'm also curious what else you personally go to nature or see your clients go to nature
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'll talk, yeah, maybe a bit generally too
Hmm.
around like the experience for highly sensitive folks around like why does nature connection matter generally? What
That's
might
great.
like why might we go to nature? Why
Yeah.
might we try and cultivate this connectedness?
Hmm.
Well, all of those benefits that we named generally about connecting with nature, we know are true for most systems.
Hmm.
What else do we know is true for highly sensitive systems? Well, we know that our systems are particularly impacted by our environment, right? Which we often talk about in the negative. So we often talk about, okay, so we get overstimulated easy, we get overwhelmed easy. The grocery store is not really made for us because it's loud and there's bright colors everywhere, and we feel the pressure of people like wanting us to bag our groceries faster, whatever it is,
Right.
right? It also does the reverse when we're really attuned to our environment. So we also are really attuned to those positive benefits
Mm.
of certain environments.
Yeah.
So nature connection can be particularly impactful for highly sensitive systems who report generally a higher connection to nature, which is some cool new research coming out. And also, yeah, we know that we tend to be more attuned to our environment, so we can access all those beautiful benefits, maybe even more if we're just spending time developing that connection. Um, so yeah, so we might go there for general, almost general maintenance of our system,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
General maintenance, we're developing a connection to almost preemptively combat that overstimulation of so many environments that aren't so positive for our system.
Mhm.
we're kind of giving ourselves this anchor point to come back to resituate, to ground, to bring forward all
Mhm.
those positive things. And for me, also to intentionally notice, isn't it beautiful that my system can also be this, can also notice the sense of awe, the sense of beauty, the sense of connection in such a deep way that maybe when I'm in the grocery store and not feeling so grateful for high sensitivity in that moment, it can be a good grounding point for me to come back to. Uh, and it's also noticing how beautiful that leaf is on my morning walk as it fluttered past me, right?
So beautiful. And it could be something that we reconnect with
Mm-hmm.
regularly. Love that
Yes.
you said general maintenance. That's exactly
General
right.
maintenance. Can we go there for problems, but also general maintenance? Not like nature
Yes.
CAA, but can we go almost preemptively to combat the sense of overstimulation?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then for introverted, highly sensitive people, can it be our retreat, our
Yeah.
quiet, our time to just be? Even it's funny, even with other people in our life, it's suddenly acceptable to not talk the whole time when we're
Mm-hmm.
in nature, when we're sitting looking at water or we're
Yeah.
walking together. It's interesting that all of a sudden it feels less pressure
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people than like if we were to go out to lunch with our best friend, right?
Right, that's true. I hear a lot of people say that, well, I live with someone or I'm, in a partnership and the other person doesn't quite understand my need for solitude or quiet, and
Yeah.
that's a way to be with someone
Hmm.
and it be socially acceptable to not talk. I love that. It's one of the
Yeah.
very few places, maybe a library might be the other one
Yeah.
that I can think of. But yeah, you can spend time together in quiet, which can
Hmm.
also be a bonding experience in another way.
Hmm.
Um, and we can lean into the part of our trait where we are more positively impacted. And we often talk about the negatives and we're more
Yeah.
negatively impacted, but we forget the flip side is also true. Having that
Hmm.
differential susceptibility that we soak up the good like a sponge. And
Yes.
nature is there for us, whether it be inside of your own house or out in the
Hmm.
world. You can
Hmm.
access it for lots of different things, for
Hmm.
problems, for maintenance, to recharge yourself. What a gift.
Hmm. A total gift. And
Hmm.
for any extroverted, highly sensitive folks who are listening and saying, well, that's not me. Well, great. You can also connect with your people, invite them to
Yes.
do something outside while soaking up all these positive benefits. Or maybe even tap into your, like some highly sensitive folks experience this desire to seek sensation. Well,
Yes.
there's so much sensation in nature. So what a lovely way to do that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was just thinking about that. It's got something for everyone, whether you're more
Hmm.
introverted, quiet
Hmm.
HSP, or you're more high sensation seeking,
Yeah,
or extroverted HSP.
right.
Uh, could we say a little bit more about what you mean when you say there's sensation in nature?
Yeah. So well, we can take it a couple ways, right? There's so much sensation to notice. Like again, if you just come back to your senses, there's so much happening in nature all the time. There's always movement, there's always sound of some kind, there's always new experience around the corner, right? Even if it's a super familiar walk to you, we don't know what's happening to that one plant that we see every day until we're there. There's something about that that can feel invigorating for folks. But there's also, of course, opportunity for more like adventure-based nature. If you want really big sensations, that's a thing that can happen too. That's not my particular flavor of HSP, but that is a flavor of HSP. And so there is that experience of like nature for everyone, almost a how do I find my connection to nature? How do I find what lands or fits for me? Um, and what kind of sensation I'm seeking? Am I seeking that quiet noticing mindfully? Am I seeking like the excitement of something new, or seeing how something turns out or how something's changing in nature? Both are available.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like you can turn the dial in whatever direction you
Hmm.
want to, turn
Yes,
it down
yeah.
or turn it up. And even in the same location, you could go on a gentle walk or you
Mhm.
could go on an intense bike ride
Yeah.
or a run or something like that. You could walk
Mhm.
quietly or you could be in conversation with someone.
Mhm.
You really get to choose. What a beautiful experience because we often don't we're not often able to tap into what we need, and nature seems to offer quite a lot. It was really
Mhm.
inspiring. Um, so we've talked about, how to access nature, what the different ways that looks like, and how we can tune in through the
Mhm.
senses, and different ways we can use nature as a support. If we could lean in, if we're leaning in even more, if we're engaging with
Mhm.
nature more therapeutically, what does
Mhm.
that look like? For using it
Mhm.
maybe for healing or
Yeah.
soothing.
Yeah. So I'll name first and foremost that different cultures have different histories and experiences and ways of engaging with nature for healing, right? Whether that be traditional medicines or rituals or ceremony or seasonal celebrations. Um, so there are endless ways to answer this based on the person, but I'll sum that up with something incredibly therapeutic can be getting to know what is my history with nature, with land, what, like, historically, what have my ancestors done to connect to nature? What could I access or connect to? Right. So I'll name that
Yeah,
as a starting place.
yeah.
Um, and then name some more general ways that we might consider, because that's more of an individual journey for folks. Um, yeah, so one of them is this sense of anchor and routine. So this sense of how do I develop a deep connectedness to nature as part of my daily routine, as part of my experience of existing in this world. Why is that therapeutic? Well, that's going to give me space to process, space to be with myself, space to do that maintenance, also built-in space to bring those problems or bring that sense of uncertainty or need for answers that maybe feel too complicated to go to other people in my
Yeah.
life with because I feel all their stuff and that gets complicated. But nature, I know, can just be an ally for me, right?
Hmm.
Um, we know, yeah, we know sensitive systems love a routine, and there's something therapeutic about that. So, what if we layer on top of that not just a routine, but a routine that's anchored in nature connection, where I get all the benefits of a routine and that anchor point that sensitive systems just adore generally, and all of that benefit of being connected to nature as a home base, as almost like, dare I say, root system that provides us with nutrients, keeps us in place, and grounds us throughout the day, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, something important there.
Hmm.
I'll pause there. I have many more things to say, but I want to hear what you think
No,
of
this is
that.
amazing. I'm thinking back during the pandemic when everything felt uncertain.
Hmm.
I, when I was out in nature or looking at the trees, looking at the sky, I was thankful I lived near water at the time. There's a little stream and just hearing the water.
Oh, beautiful.
It was such a balm for my soul,
Hmm.
and it helped me feel like myself. Like I was okay. I'm okay. I'm human. I'm here. I'm okay. Everything out here is still the same.
Hmm.
And it was such an anchor point, a root for me. Um, and I really appreciate the talking about what's your personal connection to nature through your lineage.
Hmm.
What a rich, deep connection point there. I love
Yeah.
that so much. And that it's routine, but it also could be a routine that allows awe and inspiration to come in depending
Mhm.
on what's happening. Just thinking about
Mhm.
going on this, maybe I'm walking the same path every day
Mhm.
or every week, and but each time something is slightly different. Maybe there's a bird or a mushroom or
Mhm.
something else that's happening.
And we're gonna notice them because we're highly
Yes,
sensitive, right? So
exactly.
that's the beauty.
That's the
Um,
beauty. Yes.
yeah. And just with that, right? Like the one thing I'm cautious of when I talk about connecting with nature therapeutically is I don't want to frame it that there's some kind of like secret magical like thing we have to do with nature
Yes.
to access its healing capacity. It's actually just the first answer to your question when you said, how do we go deeper? Just be with nature. Just be,
Yes.
just exist in it, just allow space and see what happens, right? Just
Mm,
allow space to notice that bird, that mushroom, and see what comes up in your system accordingly, right?
mhm,
Um, there's something, yeah, sometimes about like wanting to know the answer that I get stuck in. And so it can be really impactful and different to name maybe the answer is just to be with it, just to
mm,
be with whatever's there and create space for myself to know there's something about nature that innately brings out healing. I don't actually have to try or get it right or do the specific thing. I can just exist. I can just see what happens.
mm. A beautiful permission to not have to do anything, not
Mm-mm.
have to earn it. You can just
Yeah,
show up in nature, and that's enough.
that's enough. You've done the thing. Even if you notice, hey, I'm showing up in nature and I'm not feeling better yet. Well, you just took some time to notice that, and I would say that's a win.
That is a win,
Right.
exactly. Just to be with
Yeah.
your experience in whatever
Yeah.
way it is, and allow yourself to show up however you are. That in
Hmm.
itself is very can be very healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Are
And
there,
then,
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, are there other pieces you wanted to share around this?
Yeah, I'll share a couple other. One is this experience of mindfully engaging. So using sensitivity as a strength here, which we've kind of already touched
Mhm.
on, but this experience of, okay, as we're just being with nature, then can we notice what's happening inside? And if we're noticing, we're doing it right. And we're very good at noticing. So it's a lovely kind of task to give highly sensitive folks because it's not saying to change, it's not saying to come out with some kind of outcome, but just notice what's my experience in nature and what's happening around me, what's going on inside. Like I said, if I notice, well, I'm still feeling awful. Well, you've noticed, so you're doing well, right? If I notice that bird flying by, I'm noticing there's something important there, right? Because I'm coming back to this moment. I'm coming back to just being in space, to this sense of presence that, yeah, we tend to be quite good at noticing. So we're almost turning that sensitivity into strength here, right? Into saying, okay, we have a system that's really good at noticing. Sometimes noticing other people's emotions so much that it feels heavy, or noticing the loud sounds of the world or the pain of the world. Can I also turn that to noticing my natural environment or my body in that environment and what happens? Can I notice even like I'll challenge people to bring an intention of noticing forward? So something like, can I notice hope today?
Hmm.
And again, that could be I'm in nature, but I also could be sitting at my window, looking out my window and saying, can I notice hope? What do I
Yeah.
see? What
Hmm.
happens when I turn my beautiful skill of noticing that works all the time for me? What if I turn it towards the light, if you will, or turn it towards something that's soothing for my system?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's another piece. Pause there and see for you what comes up as I name that.
Yeah, I just appreciate highlighting this innate quality we have as sensitive people. We are the noticers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times that feels like a burden because it can feel like so much is coming in without a filter. However, in nature, we get to reframe that
Mm-hmm.
quality into a positive, and it can be actually a healing uh, tool for us to notice not only how we are, but how we're being impacted by just the subtle senses around us, the sounds, the
Yeah.
smells, the feels, the touches.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it with nature we get to take that and it be a lot simpler.
Yeah.
I'm noticing this leaf or the air on
Mm-hmm.
my skin or whatever it is. It's just a lot calmer.
Yeah. There's that calm that comes from it.
Mhm.
Um, as you were talking, an example came up for me, which I haven't thought about in a while. Um, but of giving birth to my daughter, I
Mm.
was in the hospital. Can't think of much of a less natural environment
Yeah,
usually
right.
than a sterile hospital room in a city, in the middle of a city, and feeling not calm, I would say, feeling
Yes.
rather not calm.
Hmm.
And I remember looking out the window and noticing a pine tree in someone's yard.
Hmm.
And that became the thing that I kept returning to notice, especially when all of my highly sensitive, like noticing was on so many other things, was on all the possibilities that could come from giving birth to a human, from the sounds in the
Mm.
room to like not being able to eat what I wanted, and just all these things that my system was naturally noticing, which are all important to notice too.
Hmm.
But to be able to partner with, and I can notice that tree, and there's something different that happens for me when I also allow that. Um, felt impactful. So it is, yeah, it is that sense of we naturally are noticing everything. Can we turn that towards like calling on nature to provide us with some of the beauty that it
Mm.
can in that noticing too?
Yeah, even amidst a very, I imagine, emotionally complex time for you,
Hmm.
in a busy city, in a
Yeah.
sterile hospital, you found one anchor point outside the
Hmm.
window and you were able to use that as a resource. What a great example that we can do that wherever we are.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is. And I feel so connected to that tree.
Mm-hmm.
Still, right? When I think of that example, I'm like, how do I find that tree? I don't know, but I
Yes.
want to, which I think just also speaks to our ability to, like, again, we're not in the middle of a forest,
Right.
but as highly sensitive folks, we also have this ability to connect in a really different way, to notice and to make that noticing meaningful, to build that
Mm.
connectedness.
Mm.
That yeah, that can be very healing.
Right. It's not just the noticing, it's the meaning making associated with the
Hmm.
noticing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. It could be a tree, it could be, like you mentioned before, a leaf on the sidewalk that stands
Hmm.
out to you that maybe makes you think of something else. Um, I just think about, being at the ocean reminds me of my grandmother, and that's really
Yeah.
meaningful for me. And it could be anything, though.
Hmm.
It could be a squirrel that regularly visits your backyard, or
Oh, totally. Yeah,
anything.
animals are a huge one for a lot of
Hmm.
HSPs, right?
Yeah.
That sense of, yeah, finding meaning where it is for you, but being open to it and
Hmm.
prioritizing that openness.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, being curious and open
Hmm.
to being delighted by something
Yes.
that maybe other people wouldn't notice
Hmm.
or feel that was special. Uh,
Yeah.
so this leads me to a question. We talked about this a little bit, but let's say you are in a place where you have limited access or mobility. You're in a city.
Hmm.
Maybe you're not able to get outside on your own without support. We talked a
Mhm.
little bit about connecting with things in your environment, a plant, an
Mhm.
animal, but are there other ways that we can lean into nature connection, maybe when we don't have as many options?
Yeah. So I would say few pieces. Can we start with our senses again?
Yeah,
Can we find a specific nature connection point? So something like you said, the squirrel in your backyard,
yeah.
our pet, a house plant, many a house plant potentially,
Yes.
right? Can we find those pieces?
Yeah.
Really matters, right? Can we get out of the framing that nature connection only counts if it's XYZ adventure hiking expedition thing that is one way of connecting, but can we open our hearts maybe to so many other ways of connecting and see what's available, and on top of that, knowing that everyone deserves nature spaces they can access. Can
Hmm.
we tap into advocacy as part of nature connection?
I love that.
Right? Can we tap into this maybe incredible thing that we were built for as highly sensitive folks, of people who tend to be pretty social justice minded or purpose
Hmm.
driven, tend to kind of know what needs to happen to get something to be where it needs to be, and tend to be really connected to nature. Are we actually situated as really strong nature accessibility and climate advocates
Hmm.
potentially?
Hmm.
Um, so tapping into, is advocacy part of my nature connection?
Yeah. Right. Preserving it. Well, first preserving it, but and then secondly, making it more accessible for those who don't regularly have access is so
Mhm.
important. And we
Yeah.
can then deepen our connection to nature through that advocacy work.
Or for ourselves
For ourselves
too,
too, that's
right?
true. Yeah, for
Yeah,
self or
of
others.
if I notice in my community, like I don't have access to green space,
Hmm.
or the access I have is not accessible to me,
Right.
then am I in a position as a highly sensitive person also to name that, or to connect to kind of advocacy as part of that, or connect to other people who have similar kind of goals, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so advocating for others and advocating for ourselves.
Hmm. It's such an important piece. Uh, because we can either think it's off the table completely and we're
Hmm.
powerless to it, or we
Hmm.
just have to kind of accept what's available. It's like, well, maybe
Yeah.
something could change.
Yeah, maybe something could change, and
Yeah.
maybe that seeking of change
Mm.
is part of nature connection, is part of the awe for highly sensitive folks, and the
Yes.
connectedness, and that kind of drive from our values and drive from like a place of purpose that does
Hmm.
give a lot of us like a sense of meaning,
Hmm.
um, and sense of, yeah, a sense of like maybe strength even in our sensitivity of being able to take that on, or see like what could be.
Absolutely. Because like we mentioned, we are the noticers and we are the ones that
Hmm.
notice when something needs to be different.
Yeah.
And we can feel a sense of purpose in advocacy work, not just
Hmm.
for, again, not just for ourselves and our current community, but ongoingly. We talked
Yes.
about the past, but also looking ahead.
Hmm.
And what are we leaving for those next generations in our lineage or in our community's lineage?
Right.
And yeah, that's really important to think about. I love
Hmm.
that. Well, Jenna, if there was one message you could leave us with that you'd love for HSPs to know, what would that be?
Hmm. That's my all of my system just has so much I want to say and share with highly sensitive folks. But if there was one message, it would be, you are lovable. You are so lovable. Every part of you is good, has some kind of good intention. and you deserve space to honor being your sensitive self. You deserve space to know that you are lovable and to seek a life where that's at the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. We
Mhm.
deserve that space just as much as anyone else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you for that.
Mm.
I want to thank you so much for this amazing conversation and just giving folks so many options to connect with nature, use it as a resource. Like now I'm feeling inspired to connect with my houseplants and
Yay.
elements around me even more and bring that intention into it and make it part of my rituals. And I'll be sure to share information about you in the show notes so people can find you on Instagram. They can find
Great.
your website. Before
Mhm.
we go, could you share with listeners a little bit more about working with you?
Yeah, so I'm a registered social worker and therapist in Ontario, Canada. So I work with folks who are residents of Ontario in one-on-one sessions. As a highly sensitive therapist, working with highly sensitive people. And what is my kind of goal in practice for highly sensitive folks is to work towards a life where shame around high sensitivity is no longer at kind of our core, but instead we're filled with self-compassion, we're filled with a sense of confidence in being able to know what we need, know what makes life meaningful for us, and how to go after that. Um, and I do that both through parts work, through examining, yeah, all these different parts of ourselves. How do we build a relationship to all these parts of ourselves? How do we find healing for parts that are hurting? How do we find compassion for parts that are working so hard to protect us, but we just don't understand, right? And I do that through bringing nature in as an ally. So, how do we also bring this innate healing energy of nature into healing work too?
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jenna.
Thank you.